Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, fans. This is Battlefield 1, and today's update video, we're going to be covering all the changes brought to Battlefield 1 in the May patch, including, of course, large-scale changes to a number of vehicles, planes, game modes, netcode, UI, and much more. Starting off then with those game modes. First and foremost, servers now, operation servers that is, will replay the same operations in a loop. In other words, if you enjoy a certain operation and get onto an operation server, you can stay there for as long as the server stays populated. It won't kick you out at the end of the round. What does happen, however, is that it switches the team. So if you play on the attacking team on one game of operations, lose or win independent, the next game, if you stay on that server and don't manually team switch, you will actually be defending on that operations. We've also got a ticket increase in dominations from 100 to 200, which is of course fantastic because domination games were just way too short for any kind of serious enjoyment to be had. It means that you won't be spending all of your time playing domination actually between rounds in loading screens. Instead, you'll actually be able to enjoy the game a little bit more. Furthermore, we've now got a join any operation button available on the operations page. At the bottom left, you'll find it. That will connect you to any available operations, be that 40 or 64 players, which should somewhat help with getting into full operation servers, but it is not the full fix yet, and DICE is still working on further changes to both the join algorithm as well as further changes to the way the operation servers themselves run. They have promised us, for example, that operations in the future will not just simply replay the same operation again and again, but instead we'll actually have an operation playlist where you progress from one set of operations, from one set of maps to the next, and so on. Furthermore, in the department of changes to game modes, we've got some changes to conquest scoring. Specifically, actually, you now get less points for actually capturing or neutralizing a flag. That big fat bonus there has been reduced. However, to somewhat compensate for this, there's now more capture ticks. That is to say, you will be getting more points for staying on the point while you actually capture it. And to facilitate a little bit more of playing around the objective and not everybody simply zerging on the objective, you will now only have to be on the objective for 30 versus the previous 50% of the time needed to capture the objective to receive the relevant bonus. That applies both to the flag neutralizing bonus and of course the flag capturing bonus. Moving on then to the changes to stationaries. Now we've had a couple of changes here. First and foremost, the health of stationary cannons and AAs has been doubled, flat out a 100% increase. However, once they reach 50% health now, where they used to obviously then be destroyed, they will not actually be destroyed, simply be disabled, and will be usable once a support player or anybody else who's carrying a wrench, for example a tanker, will come up and repair them to 100%. At this point then, you can continue using the AA. The AA has also seen a change to the way its range works. Previously, it had somewhat of a bubble, that is to say, it shot relatively similar in all directions. Now this is changed with a very minor reduction in its horizontal range to 300 meters, however a relatively hefty increase to its vertical range to 450 meters. This is essentially to stop pilots flying at the very edge of the skybox being able to bomb and take out the AA without the AA actually being able to physically reach them, independent of how fantastic their aim or prediction actually was. Moving on then from the stationaries to the airplanes, those targeted by those AAs. There's a huge amount of changes to them. However, the first and most universally appliant change is the available rear view now for pilots to ensure that they have a better idea of what's actually shooting them or what they possibly missed or didn't miss on the last bombing run. Furthermore, we've now got a tighter turning curve universally for the attack plane, making it closer to that of the fighter plane. Not quite as good, but a lot closer than it previously was, making it a lot more difficult possibly for fighters to take out attack planes and more viable for attack planes, depending on their version, to actually go for fighters, increasing the amount of air-to-air combat hopefully seen in Battlefield 1. Specifically regarding the airship buster version of the attack plane, it's had its primary weapon damage, that's to say its weapon damage per second, adjusted to actually be identical to that of the fighter, making it excellent now, making it much better at taking out aircraft as it previously was. Furthermore, the speed boost for the airship buster attack plane as well as the dogfighter has been reduced from 30 down to 15 seconds. In that period, the attack plane will actually be able to outmaneuver, at least theoretically in turning speed, a normal non-boost boosting fighter. However, a dogfighter variant with a speed boost will of course still have the tightest turning circle available on Battlefield 1 for planes. The attack plane tanker version has also seen a buff with its primary shell, that relatively heavy hitting, slow firing, slow traveling cannon, seeing a slight increase in its muzzle velocity, not so significant. However, a relatively decent decrease in its drag, which essentially means the drop of the shell will now be less, making it easier to hit targets at medium-long ranges, making it easier to line up 2 or even 3 shots on an enemy tank when coming in from a dive. Moving on then to the fighter, specifically the dogfighter variant, this has seen the introduction of a new secondary weapon in the form of incendiary ammunition, which should do increased damage to plane parts, making it much easier and much faster to cripple key parts of enemy planes, rewarding the players that go for those wings or flaps when shooting down enemy aircraft. This should technically at least make it better at taking out especially the bombers and attack planes that are of course slower traveling, able to cripple them, fly away, repair and come back for the kill, possibly before of course they've managed to get to safety. Furthermore, on the topic of fighter planes, the dogfighter has seen its special ability essentially swapped with that of the bomber killer, with the bomber killer now having the quick repair, and of course, as earlier mentioned, the dogfighter now having the improved speed boost. Moving on then to changes brought into the tank, starting off with the light close support tank. This has seen its ammo count increased from 4 to 5, and more importantly seen its secondary weapon replaced with a light machine gun, making it likely more effective at taking out larger groups of enemy infantry, and of course making the primary and secondary weapon of this tank independent, meaning you're going to be able to put out damage more consistently. The light flanker version of the light tank has sadly seen a nerf, with its DPS staying the same, however its reload time increasing. That is to say, its damage per shot has gone up, its reload time has gone up as well, meaning it'll take you longer to actually rechamber. However, its damage per shot has also gone up, that is to say, against armored targets. The summary of this is thus that it's equally effective at taking out armor, however, less effective at taking out infantry because there will be a higher downtime between taking out targets. The light howitzer tank has also seen some changes, with the light machine gun being replaced by the heavy machine gun. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute, it always said that this was a heavy machine gun, but actually DICE made a little bit of a mistake there, and it wasn't actually ever a heavy machine gun. That is to say, you should be doing a little bit more damage with it now. Furthermore, on the topic of the light howitzer tank, there's now a third-person free look available. While of course there is no turret on the howitzer, so you won't be able to shoot in all directions, you can at least look behind you now when you find yourself taking damage from that direction. Moving on to the heavy tank from the light tank. Here we've had only one change, and that's the flame package of the tank. Instead of the previous secondary weapon available to the driver, you now actually have a flamethrower as driver, further strengthening this tank in close-quarter anti-infantry situations. The Tank Hunter landship has seen the introduction of a rear-firing tank gewehr besides its front-firing tank gewehr, and the mortar landship has been made generally more viable, with some changes both to the mortar and its special abilities. Firstly, of course, then its mortar, its secondary mortar shell is now no longer what it previously was, an airburst variant, instead a heavy mortar shell, which should do more damage against both infantry and armor targets than the previous airburst model. Furthermore, a track repair and smoke ability replaced the previous smoke and gas mortar, making it more viable for the front lines and reducing the amount of time it should spend necessarily camping behind the front lines, simply firing its mortar. The last thing to note about tanks is that their repair time has been decreased alongside the amount they repair per repair cycle. So if you repair the tank as driver, you will now repair the tank, that is to say you will complete one repair cycle in 5 instead of 8 seconds. However, your tank will gain less health from that than previously with the longer repair cycle. Moving on then from vehicles, finally, to some gameplay mechanics, specifically the bayonet charge. It's seen a bit of a kick in the nuts, and frankly, rightfully so. First of all, the preparation stage now has a limitation on the amount of degrees you can turn. That is limited now to 50 degrees. So no longer starting your bayonet, turning 180, and then charging right into the enemy behind you. At least in theory, this should no longer happen. Strafing has also been disabled for the bayonet charge, so you should now have an easier time shooting charging individuals, especially with the low fire rate, high damage model weapons. Thinking here, of course, of revolvers, sniper rifles, or the medic SLRs. There's also been a slight reduction in the turn rate of the bayonet charge, making it more difficult to actually kind kind of charge into a building. Furthermore, we've got louder footsteps, and last but definitely not least, the elimination of the extra health during bayonet charge. That is to say, 2 shots in close quarter with a revolver will once more down a charging player at full health, whereas of course previously, because of the reduced damage they took, you would actually, with some weapons very reliant on that 2-shot kill, require 3 bullets to down a full health charging player. Moving on then from the bayonet charge to UI and setting changes. Firstly, there's been the introduction of the grenade resupplied UI. You will notice that when playing Battlefield 1 yourself, in the clips actually in today's video, it's not included because this is pre-recorded footage, useful for telling you how soon you're going to get that resupplied grenade when hovering around a support player, that is to say a support ammunition crate. Furthermore, you can reduce and customize camera shake now. That is to say, if you go into your video options, you can turn it down from the default 80% to 30%. You can't sadly completely eliminate it, but you can reduce it quite substantially, or if you're looking to make some kind of cinematic experience in Battlefield 1, feel free to turn it up all the way to 100%. Another addition to the UI is the indication to support players that players around them require ammo automatically when they are low on ammo. So no longer will you actually have to request ammo for the necessary icon to pop up above your head, but as soon as your player has low ammo count, support players around you will see this. Whether or not, of course, they react to this remains yet to be seen. Last but not least then, netcode. The last patch made a lot of people very salty because of netcode changes, and there's been some adjustments here that are worth noting in this video. First of all, the threshold, where calculation turns from the player's client to the server side, has been changed depending on region. That is to say, the threshold in Europe and the US is now at 130, and the threshold in other regions of the world at 200 milliseconds, which should eliminate most of the problems most players experience with this. Furthermore, the amount you have to lead your targets if you are above the necessary threshold is actually reduced, because it now calculates the amount of lead dependent on how much you are above the threshold, not how much your ping actually is. So to take the example, if you are playing on a US or Europe server with a ping of 180 milliseconds, you won't have to lead account for those 180 milliseconds. Instead, you will just have to account for the difference in the regional threshold, in this case 130, and your ping, in this case 180, meaning you only have to actually compensate for 50 milliseconds. With all that being said, those are the changes introduced in the May patch. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you felt it was useful. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of the May patch, all the changes introduced, as well as of course your usual video suggestions for Battlefield 1 videos. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.